Today we're going to be talking a little bit about clergy support. And we felt Pastor Appreciation Month, even if it's a Hallmark holiday, is still a really good time to talk a little bit about this issue, and particularly right now during the pandemic, when there are just so many more levels and layers of complexity for our leaders in our faith communities, that we might just chat about this a little bit and really just have a conversation about it. It's interesting, I went online to sort of look and see what was out there in terms of what are people saying about clergy support. And I was really surprised there was very little, honestly. It was more about the decisions that have to be made and, you know, leading your congregants through conflict and that kind of stuff, but very little about, you know, our actual pastors and the kinds of stresses they might be experiencing and the kinds of ways that we, as the church, whether it's provincial staff or lay leaders, can be providing that support during these days. So, but I asked David and Nola and Carol to join us to maybe talk a little bit about just their thoughts, and then we can open it up for some Q&A and some discussion. And I don't know, Nola had a great response a couple weeks ago at a provincial staff meeting where we talked about this a little bit. So I was going to let Nola, kick us off and talk a little bit about this. So
okay, I wonder what I said.
I wonder what you said. It was profound.
Well, I made a little list. If I were looking to support my pastor, and I've actually tried to do a couple of these, I would write a handwritten note of appreciation. I would say, preaching to an empty sanctuary is hard. It takes more energy to do that than it does to preach to a room full, and you are doing it week after week after week, and thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Another thing I would do that I have not done is I would call the pastor and say, may I bring you a meal? You're having to spend a lot of time doing things in ways that wasn't how you learned it at seminary. Can I bring you something? Or no, don't ask. Say, I'm going to bring you a meal. Which night? Because if you say, can I bring you a meal? They're likely to say, oh, no, please don't bother. You don't need to do that. I'm going to bring you a meal. Which night am I coming? If someone complains to you about something in the church, encourage them to go to the pastor, so that, as we have said before, let's talk to one another instead of about one another. One I thought of this morning in the pastor to pastor call. If something good happens in your life, tell the pastor. You often tell them good things when you see them at the church door on Sunday. So do it now. Send an email or drop a note or a Facebook message or something that says, hey, I just want you to know my kid got straight A's, and celebrate with me. You know, I want you to know I'm doing so much better and I've loved walking out in my yard. Probably the most important thing to do for your pastor is pray for them. If you are in a meeting with them, invite others, get the group together. If you're in the board of elders or board of trustees or something like that, just have somebody primed to raise their hand and say, we're going to pray for our pastor right now, and somebody ready to do it, to speak a prayer in the pastor's presence. There's something really powerful about being prayed for by members of your congregation. Another thing I thought in the very practical sense is, don't expect your pastor to do all the pastoral care. If you know of somebody that's sick and needs something, do something. Generally, our congregations are really good with that. And my last thought was, don't pressure your pastor to open up the congregation or go back to worship too quickly. Because the pastors, a lot of folks are trying to follow the directives of the PEC and trying to balance the need to be together with the need not to have to preside at a funeral. So that's my top of mind thinking, Ruth. I don't know if I said anything that I said 2 weeks ago or not, but and I guess most of those are summarized by be kind. Look for ways to do something for somebody.
Tommy's talking, but he's muted.
Tommy, I think you're on mute. I was going to say, it was kind of sad to me that Nola would have to say that, but it's true. And that's the part about be kind to your pastor.
I like the rather blunt option you gave people, balancing the need to be together with the need to not have to preside at a funeral. Putting it that way may help people understand really how serious, you know, the decision really is.
That's sort of the tack I'm taking when people ask about singing and playing in bands. You know, which one of your choir members do you want to have to bury because somebody in the room was a super spreader and didn't know it? Or which ones of your congregation?
Carol, do you or David have anything to add?
I'll let David go.
Thanks, Carol. Well, I guess I started off thinking about the stressors that are out there for pastors. And this comes from the pastor-to-pastor conversations we've been hosting for 28 or 29 weeks now. Nola keeps, she has the counter in her office. It keeps ticking over, but
29.
29, yeah. So, you know, ministry, I'm preaching to the choir mostly here. Ministry is demanding in the best of circumstances. It just is. You know, our pastors spend 50 to 60 hours a week carrying out their ministry in the congregations. And then you add to that sort of the additional amount of time that it takes to make all these transitions that we've had to make on technology and the channels of communication. And you add to that the fatigue factor of having to communicate in channels that you've never used before and learn how to do it effectively. I mean, I was just preaching at a church and led Holy Communion Sunday. And I can tell you, when I was done with the service, I was like twice as tired as I normally would be. And it's just sort of, you know, where I think we all know that that's a reality. Some of our pastors are getting some pressure from a vocal minority that wants to take things back to quote unquote normal. A smaller vocal minority that's kind of bringing the politics of the situation into the picture. And so that's just an added stress, because how do a pastor protects the flock? That's a pretty big job. What do you do when someone within the flock is suggesting things that are dangerous to the other 99? You know, I'm slaughtering using the wrong Bible analogies there, but you get the point. We have to remember that our pastors have spouses, and they have children, and they have parents and siblings, and all of those people are going through COVID just like you are and just like your pastor is. And so you can imagine what it's like being a pastor working from home when your spouse is working from home and your third grader is going to school from home and your mother needs to have somebody take her to the doctor's appointment. You know, and it's all on you. And so before that was not so stressful, but now it you know, just the simple day-to-day stuff gets really, really complicated. I think the last two things are just sort of observational. You know, and Riddick knows this. You know, one of the most powerful images of the church for Moravians is the sheepfold. And the pastor as the under shepherd of the good shepherd. And you know, we are so used to the highly relational, face-to-face, one-on-one, reach out and put a hand on a shoulder, or you know, look each other in the eye from 3 or 4 feet away and do our work. And you know, now I'm hearing pastors saying, boy, you know, trying to do pastoral care via Zoom is just terrible, or how do you really connect with people on the telephone, or what do you do with the members who don't have email and don't have a computer, and so it just goes on and on. So I was just maybe reflecting on all the stressors that are out there. I guess I'll stop there. I mean, I do have some ideas about how we can care for our pastors, but I thought I'm just trying to look at the whole picture to say, wow, the main message to lay people is understand that your pastor, just like you're in a different environment, your pastor's in a different world too. And you have to be kind of cognizant of what they're facing as a person and as a pastor, so.
I think I didn't make my list. Nola's list is very good. I would endorse it. David's observations are right on track. What has surprised me about myself in these weeks is that, and months, is that the COVID situation, we have to spend some time holding it out so that we can still do our work. We have to spend some time and energy to hold it out. And what has been happening in the last few weeks for me, and this is, I would suggest for parishioners to know this, is that stuff has been crushing in. That emotional energy that I've been holding it out, I'm not able to hold it out anymore. And that means I have to spend time fixing me, trying to get me back in shape to do ministry. But I have been very surprised. I had a friend who came down with COVID, a member of my congregation. I was very surprised at my panic and my lack of non-anxious presence in that moment. I found myself sort of saying very loudly, "Wear your mask, wear your mask," so, because it's a frightening reality. You think that one of my friends could die from this because he was at risk. And so, I had that. And the other thing is that in some pastoral care situations, I've been finding myself to be more emotional than I normally am. I can keep a non-anxious presence a lot, but I've really found myself getting in a little trouble because I haven't been able to hold that out. Now, what can a congregation do for a pastor that's dealing with that kind of stuff? I think give them some time off. That's usually what I need. Give a little extra time off to recover from the fact that the world is emotionally charged right now, both politically, both socially, both politically, socially, and in church, trying to decide what to do and how to do each new level of opening up. I have to admit that so many of the skills needed right now are not skills that I have, nor do I wish to have, especially the technological. And I have spent 45 years learning how to connect from the pulpit. And that is not given now. Or if it's given, I have a mask on, and everybody else has a mask on. And so there's that layer in between us that is not what I'm used to. So we are, we're all in these new situations. So that I can really only speak to my own experience. I will have to say that I've thought of retirement more often in the recent weeks than I have ever thought of it before. I could do it, but I have a commitment to my congregation. I'm not going to, but I have thought, wouldn't that be easier? Wouldn't it just be better to be out of this difficulty? And so that's what I would say. So how does a congregation help a pastor in all of those kind of things? Nola's list is excellent. I really don't think that the folks in my church think about taking care of me. I don't think that happens. I don't have any experience that says, they ask me how I am physically, are you doing okay? But there's no real getting beside me and walking with me in the journey. And any kind of thing that has happened, I've had to open that door And I have opened that door more and more at Moravia than I ever have before. There, you know, there's something brilliant about Matthew Allen. And I think that out at Oak Grove, he told everybody that October was Pastoral Appreciation Month. And he wrote a newsletter that said, October is Pastoral Appreciation Month. And all of this information went out about that it was that month. And I never even knew that there was a Pastoral Appreciation Month. And he planted the seeds for some great appreciation that I think he received. And maybe it's a little late now, but that's another way that pastors can sort of, you know, you do it in the newsletter without attribution, writer attribution, and you have that. And you put that list that Nola said, write your pastor, you know, call your pastor, take a meal to your pastor, da, 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 and you put all that out there, and then people would begin to think about it.
I do think there is power in really just asking for support, right? I mean, just like you just said, I mean, Matthew did it through the newsletter, but to just be able to say, here is what I need from you. Here's what would be of help to me right now. And I know that's hard for pastors because they're so used to putting it out the other direction, right? But that seems like that would also be helpful.
In my monthly pastoral report here at Moravia, I started putting the lows, the heights, the highlights, and the lowlights. And I included in the highlights and the lowlights some personal information about highs and lows. And that has been very helpful to just put it out there. You know, when my dog died, when my parents passed, and things like that, that normally you wouldn't just put out there. I've done that.
We share something with church boards when we do quadrennial reviews. It comes up quite a bit, well, not quite a bit, but frequently. You know, because we ask boards to identify areas of growth or development for their pastor, and what often will show up is the board is concerned about the pastor's self-care. And so we always take that opportunity to remind the board about all of the tools for self-care that are available out there. You know, continuing ed money, the minister's care plan, talking to a bishop, talking to the PEC, vacation days, days off, etc. And then we often will deputize the board, or maybe the executive committee, or the vice chair of the board of elders. But we basically say, you're going to need to get in your pastor's face and tell them to go home. You're not needed to clean up after this meeting. We got this. Or ask them, have you taken your day off today? Or saying, we know you came back to do that funeral from your vacation. Have you taken comp time for those days you lost on vacation? Or, you know, just basically be the watchdog of the pastor's self-care. And we basically give somebody in the board permission to do that. And what was really great was we did a review just recently, and we had the meeting with the pastor, and one of the things that came up was, well, they're obviously listening to what PEC said, because right after the meeting, people came up to me and said, you're going to go on vacation between now and Thanksgiving. And, you know, I said, yes, you know, just exactly what we wanted to have happen. But Ruth, you know, you can't, pastors most of the time are not going to be asking. They're going to have to be told, and so we need people to rally around them to say, you know, take care of yourself, take care of yourself, you know. So.
Just a little bit of some nuance to this that may sound like I'm contradicting. I do think it's important that what we do is help congregations appreciate and support pastors. But also realize that I don't think it's the ministry of the congregation to take care of the pastor. And I'm aware of circumstances where the concern for the pastor, for whatever reason, has really become the mission of the congregation. And I think that's problematic on several levels. So one of the things that I do talk to students about is really trying to do a good job of self-care, be honest with your congregation about what limits are and stuff like that. And as Carol said, I think, you know, sharing important personal things. So like the death of a parent, the death of a pet, whatever. But then I think it's important for pastors to go to the places they can get help rather than putting that burden on the congregation. So like I said, I'm agreeing in principle, but I think there's some important limiters that are really important. Just a couple other things that I thought were interesting. I think probably some congregation members may be aware of the amount of work that pastors put into getting ready for a worship service. They're probably not aware of the amount of energy that pastors often get back from a worship service. And I say that as an introvert, as an extrovert, that's probably a different introvert extrovert experience. But I really love watching faces when I preach and seeing the energy that's coming back. And part of what I think a lot of pastors are dealing with now is they've gone to all the extra trouble of getting a Zoom worship ready, which presents its challenges that are different than a regular, what we're used to, and get very little energy back from that. So it's not only are you expending more energy, but you're getting less back. And this is happening at a time when this is true not only for pastors, but for everybody. We don't have the ways of recharging and just sort of dealing with our normal stressors. So we're all in more stressed situations, and we've got less healthy ways of dealing with those stressors. And so I think just keeping that out in front of everybody, is an important thing to do. So those are my 4 cents. I would ask if anybody has any experience like with Methodist colleagues that have a pastor-parish relations committee. I know that's part of their polity. And I may leave just a second early today because I teach it too. And we have a Methodist student in that class who's currently, she's a part-time student, and she's a part-time pastor at one of the local Methodist churches. And I hear her talking about the PPRC, and part of me wonders what sort of training PPRCs get in terms of, positive affirmations for pastors and some of the things that we were talking about earlier. Or is it merely a chance to, I just don't know that much about it, but to me, the specific training they get could be interesting. It might be something that would be interesting to think about, as we work with joint boards, maybe especially in the call process or something, to say, hey, when this new pastor comes in, you may not have been doing anything like this before, but here's something to think about in terms of having some people on the boards who might be in charge of, let them do all the work in terms of all the work, getting ready for October. Right? Have them write the article, have them, manage the suggestions, have them sort of be the cheerleaders for doing that. So it doesn't appear that pastors are self-serving. I think it's great for pastors to let people know that we're people, but I'm aware that depending on how things get phrased or viewed, it might look self-serving.
Riddick, what does PPRC stand for? Pastor
Parish Relations Committee.
And I would be curious too to know what kind of training they get so that they don't, if we form something like that in a Moravian congregation, it doesn't think it's a personnel committee whose job it is to evaluate the pastor's performance.
Right, and I'm pretty sure that's not what it is. And I've heard her talk about it on several occasions, and I just would like to learn more about it.
Mm-hmm. That would be really helpful.
Stuff online.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience in Bethlehem, Central Church a number of years ago, everything I did was a number of years ago, had a committee, a relationship committee like that, but it was basically not as much to help the pastor with self-care as it was to protect the pastor. because there were always people, you know, the parking lot group and people who wrote nasty letters or calls or whatever. And so they did have a training. I'm pretty sure Marie Coates was involved with that. And then at College Hill, we adopted that also to, it's just a group of people to handle basically conflict, I guess, more than helping kind of things.
Yeah, I just saw a study, speaking of conflict, when I was trolling the internet for some interesting things. 27% of evangelical and mainline pastors said addressing conflict and maintaining unity is a primary source of stress for them, and that's up from 8%, which was earlier this year. So like from just like the first quarter of 2020, 8% it was said it was a major stressor. Now it's 27, maintaining unity and addressing conflict. So I don't know if there are some ways we could be helping with that. I'm sure that comes up in the clergy conversations as well.
One of the things that I've had to do in this time is to ask the board to step up on contact with my congregation, because I'm getting through the congregation pretty well on telephone, but they need to hear from somebody else. You know, they don't need to just be hearing from me. And it does create a little bit of, well, I'm hearing such and such, Pastor, and that's okay. I mean, you know, they are hearing such and such, you know, but I've needed for the church to extend itself in a different way than just me being the one who's doing that. And I had to create the system, but it is working, and it's helping a lot, and it's taking some pressure off of me, because my pressure, I'm trained to look at who's coming to church, who's you know, and valuing my ministry on a lot of old previous March previous ideas, and it's good to have a few more people thinking about our future and thinking about how we need to be the church right now. And so that's another way you can help your pastor, is to make it a point to contact those people that you feel some connection to, and let the pastor know when there's a need for the pastor. So we've been, you know, I've been trying to extend that stretch of the church. But
well, I know, yeah, Unity's board, I think they divvied up. Of course, we're a smaller church, but the board divvied up the households, and those folks have been doing a good job. I mean, you know, this has stretched out longer than any of us thought it would, but we just got a card this week from the woman on the board who's got our household, right, checking in with us, and so yeah, I agree that piece is really important as well. Other thoughts, Carol?
Yeah, I'm came on here today on behalf of our two pastors at Lidditz, Mark Breland and Dean Jurgen. We're kind of like in a perfect storm here. The board decided to reopen this past Sunday with all the precautions and everything, except Dean, of course, has Parkinson's disease, so he didn't feel comfortable doing that, obviously. So he's up in a room in the church, not in the sanctuary, doing his part of the service. And then there, you know, it's not greatly attended. And there's a whole part of the church that doesn't agree with opening the church, so we have that conflict. And then one of our staff members who was in charge of all Sunday school and curriculum resigned. So, you know, we have two pastors who are now, not only do they have all these things which you've mentioned that they've had to deal with with the COVID, but now they have to take up the slack for this person who's resigned. And I'm on the Christian Ed committee, and we met last night to try to divvy out all these things. But man, there's an awful lot of stress, and I don't know that 1 month would do of appreciation. I think, you know, they just, you know, I did reach out to one board member, and I kind of chastised her and said, you know, you got to step up here, because it's too much. The burdens are just too much.
Yeah, Pastor Appreciation Month is a little bit like Black History Month. You hope that what it does is raise the awareness so that carries over to the other 11 months.
But it's not a Hawthorne, I mean, a Hallmark seasonal day and month.
I found it interesting that Carol Dague mentioned a resignation of a staff person. Carol Foltz mentioned, retirement's going through my head more. And so PEC folks, I'm wondering if you think that COVID is gonna maybe impact the demographics of the pastorate. I mean, we knew what things looked like. Are we thinking that this might lead to some earlier retirements, or to anybody leaving and saying this is just too stressful altogether? And I'm obviously not asking for any names or anything like that, but just wondering if there's any thought related to that. And sort of on a more positive note, younger clergy coming in, you know, people we've got in seminary, people who'll be coming in the next couple of years, that their religious experience will have been profoundly affected by COVID. And Zoom church will not seem, who knows how normal that's going to seem to them. And given some of the discussions we've had about technology, that, you know, this stuff isn't daunting to them at all. So, you know, like I said, so my question is, do we have any sort of immediate sense of, you know, shaping of things, but also, you know, I'm sort of looking forward to people who are really seeing new opportunities because of technology and the way that churches have been able to broaden their reach with the online move.
Well, I can think of a few things to say. One is, I have certainly not brought up to any pastor, are you thinking about retirement because of COVID? I don't want to give anyone any ideas. So I don't have any direct information by polling the pastors as to how many are planning to retire because of COVID, nor do I want to run that survey. The retirement projections, I'm pulling them up now. We have 10, 11, we have 11 pastors that are already at their early retirement age of 62. And we have 5, and that's 10. We have 10 pastors that are either at or will reach their Social Security retirement age within the next, well, between now and the next synod. So we got some folks that are on their way to making those decisions, but I don't have any firm you know, data from surveying anybody. And really, the people that are nearing retirement age, most of them seem to be on track for quote unquote a normal retirement schedule. I mean, I don't hear any, the people that are talking to me about, you know, plans for possible retirement, it's not, the ones that are coming in the door are not, it's not being driven by COVID, it's just being driven by the course of life and ministry mostly. So.
Thanks. It'll be interesting to see, you know, whenever COVID ends, you know, 2 years on the other side of that, if we can look back and you know, it may be like you say, everything is sort of continued on sort of the normal course of life thing, and maybe not, but we won't know for a while, obviously.
But you know, I think I mean, I think it. Yeah, I think your point about monitoring it for 2 years after COVID is a good idea, because you know people's response to crisis it doesn't happen in the crisis. Sometimes it's you know it follows on. So
I
I
really
think a lot has to do with how long this goes on. The other thing would be people who may have planned to work till 70 and COVID goes on and the stress level continues, may decide to go a little earlier than they would normally have. But you know, we don't have a crystal ball, but certainly life getting stressful around retirement age leads many, many people to retire earlier than they had planned to originally.
I want to circle back on Riddick's comments about the church taking care of pastors. I think it's really important for I want to say this with Riddick. It's really important for pastors to have their care ongoing, and it's up to the pastor to make sure that the support is in place. I think the best a congregation can do is to do the light care, like the things that Nola mentioned are sort of light care of appreciation. But pastors need to know that there are resources outside of the local congregation for their care, and they need to take advantage of them. And I think that's absolutely essential. And pastors need to be doing their own inner work so that they learn how to deal with certain emotional situations or physical situations that come up, so that they have more resilience and more capacity to see how serious a situation is, whether it's a bad day or a bad week or a bad season or a catastrophe. You have to be able to weigh that out, and that's personal work. That's absolutely personal pastoral work. And I think, well, I don't think that needs to be said. I was going to say something about pastors needing to be more honest when the bullies are working, or there's real dysfunction in the congregation. There needs to be a way to say that doesn't escalate it. But that's not that's not what this conversation is about. But I do think that pastors need to do their work so that they can stay as resilient as they can in their work.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I do think it's what Nola said at the end of her remarks about being kind to your pastors, but I think our pastors, we have to be kind to themselves as well, right? I mean, I think that's what you're saying. And I do think we have to understand, I mean, I've never really used this phrase before we entered this period, but I keep saying, I don't have the bandwidth for that. And I think that's, which really weird for me, but I find that, decision making takes longer. Meetings need to be shorter. People's attention spans are shorter. Yeah, you're right. Everybody is stressed. And ultimately, though, yeah, we've got to figure it out for ourselves, and we have to do that inner work. And but being kind to ourselves. But I do think extending to others, certainly, sort of the idea that we have to allow more time for important decision making, and reminding folks of some of that kind of just the things that are a little different and a little off about this time. We're just not all, and as longer it stretches out, I think the worse it's getting in terms of our ability to just continue to move on as if it's all okay.
Ruth, this is Tommy. I have a question for the pastors that are on the call. And I know that the province provides counseling through CareNet, I guess it is, or the Center for Congregational Health. Is there a stigma attached to that that would cause pastors maybe not to use it when they should, or is it used a lot?
It's an anonymous program, Tommy. Pastors and church educators and their family can go to CareNet to receive services. We get billed for those services. There's no public face to what's going on. I mean, the only point of public face is actually probably me. And that's only because sometimes a pastor will talk to me and I'll direct him there. And I'm the one who has to get the invoice from CareNet. So I mean, we pay the bill, but so it's not. There's no stigma attached to it. And what's really been encouraging, I've been at this for 10 years, and I would say in the past 2 terms, not so much the first term, but in that, say, the past 6 years, pastors and church educators have been taking advantage of this more, and that's what it's there for. So.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, I would just say that I have availed myself of CareNet services, and I'm very grateful for what they had to offer. And in courses that I teach, I let students, I encourage students to be aware of the resources that are provided either by their province or their denomination for, like Carol said, to know where to go to get the kind of help you need. And if counseling is the kind of help you need, so I do everything I can in classes to take any stigma away from it, encourage people to find out what resources are there, and try to provide a good model and example for folks. But I think the truth is, in the South, there probably still is some stigma for some folks. And so doing whatever we can to, encourage people just to be healthy is an important thing to do.
I think Carol's comment about making sure the pastor maybe has some extra time off, because time away is where you evaluate, all right, what is it about what happened yesterday that really hooked me? And was this a temporary hook, or is this a problem that I need to have addressed? How do I evaluate my own health, my own spiritual and physical and emotional health in light of what's going on? And that takes time. It brings me back to some of the supervision sessions in CPE, when your supervisor basically said, okay, that obviously got to you. What is it? Why did it get to you? Why did you say that? Why did you feel this? Chase it down. And that the time to do that is just critical.
Well, thank you all so much. I don't know if anyone has any other thoughts to add, but I feel like this has been a good, rich conversation, and I'm glad to have each of you in it.
I would respond to Mike posted in the chat early on that this would be a great short article in the Moravian. I've been capturing the chat also as Ruth has been posting it. And I would offer to draft some of that up and send it around to some of you all and say, all right, what did I miss? David, what of your stressors did I miss? Carol, what of your insights did I miss? What do we need to add? And can we get a short article in the Moravian for congregations about pastoral care in terms of care of the pastor?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's an excellent idea, and I think the Moravian is a great way to do it because it has such a huge circulation.
I think I'd like to add one thing to the conversation. It's from personal experience. So somebody will tell me, I just wanted to let you know that I'm praying for you in the PEC. That means so much to me. And sometimes when people tell me that, it's sort of I find myself catching my breath a bit, just to say, wow. And then I say, thank you. if I had to give a layperson advice about how to care for their pastor, I probably would put that at the top of the list and at the end of the list too. Sort of, that'd be the sandwich. Whatever else we say, let's sandwich it in pray for your pastor.
And tell them you're doing it.
Yes, yes. So,
I have always been blessed when I visit with somebody and they say, I pray for you in the church every night. I go, really? It's just an amazing gift. And they are. And there are many people doing that.
there was one lady in Miami when she told me that, I said, and you're the only reason we're staying on track. She was a real prayer warrior, so.